The sun was setting on the dusty, ruined market planet. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burnt metal. All around the open square, slaves were being auctioned off, most of them broken, filthy, and lost. They were creatures from different worlds, some humanoid, others strange and unrecognizable. Their eyes were hollow, their bodies thin and bruised from years of mistreatment. The crowd, made up of traders and the richest buyers from across the galaxy, stood in silence. They looked at the slaves as if they were nothing more than objects to be sold. Among all these pitiful beings, one stood out. She was different. Her name was Lira. Lira was the last of her kind, an alien race from a far-off planet that had been destroyed in a war. The war had been brutal, and her people had paid the highest price. Her body was marked with scars from battles long past, and her eyes, a deep silver shade, were a window to a lost history. But her beauty wasn't what made her stand out. It was her quiet strength, the way she held herself even when her world had crumbled around her. She stood there in the center of the auction block, hands shackled, her head bowed low. Her body was weak and starving from weeks of travel in a filthy slave transport. Her clothes, rags barely covering her, clung to her thin form. The traders whispered among themselves, eyeing her like vultures over a carcass. Lira didn't look up. She had long given up on hope. In her heart, she was already dead. The auctioneer, a gruff, bald man with a voice like gravel, raised his hand. His booming voice echoed through the square. "Step right up. The last of the Zetarian race, the rarest prize in the galaxy." He motioned to Lira, his eyes gleaming with greed. No one else like her. A real treasure, folks. But no one stepped forward. Lira's heart sank. She knew what this meant. No one wanted her. She was worthless. Her people had been enslaved, hunted, and killed for centuries. The war that had destroyed her world had also destroyed any chance for her people to be seen as valuable. Now she was just another slave to be discarded. The crowd murmured in disappointment. A few traders shook their heads and others turned away. It was always the same. When her race was mentioned, people either ran away in fear or laughed at her, mocking the idea of such a broken species being of any worth. And then, just as she thought the auction was about to end, something changed. A loud sound echoed through the market. The crowd went silent, looking up. A sleek human ship had landed at the edge of the square. It was small but fast, its hull gleaming under the setting sun. The traders straightened up, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. It was rare for humans to come to places like this. They were known for avoiding slave markets until now. The ship's door opened and a tall figure stepped out. He was dressed in simple military-style clothes, dark and practical with a holster on his hip. His hair was cut short, his face weathered by years of battle. He had the look of someone who had seen the horrors of war but was still alive. The crowd gasped. A human. But not just any human. A commander. He stood tall and walked forward with a calmness that was almost unnerving. His piercing blue eyes scanned the crowd. He didn't flinch at the sight of the slaves or the cruel laughter of the traders. Instead, his eyes locked on Lira. And for the first time in a long while, she felt someone truly see her. His gaze was intense but not hostile. It was full of something she hadn't felt in years, compassion. The traders waited, assuming he was just another rich man trying to buy a pet or a cheap servant. But the commander walked straight to the auctioneer, his boots clicking sharply against the metal floor. The auctioneer looked up, startled, but quickly recovered. Well, what do we have here?" The auctioneer smiled, trying to make the best of the situation. "You must be here for something special. I have plenty of fine slaves to offer." The commander didn't smile. His voice was low and commanding. "I want her." The auctioneer blinked in confusion. "Her?" He motioned to Lira. "This one? She's worthless. Look at her. She's barely alive." The commander's gaze didn't waver. "I said I want her," the crowd murmured in surprise. The traders were confused, unsure of what to make of this situation. Some of them began to laugh, but the commander's expression didn't change. He pulled out a small data pad and quickly transferred the credits to the auctioneer. The transaction was done. No one had expected this. The auctioneer was stunned, but he handed the commander the release papers without hesitation. "She's yours." Lira stood frozen. She didn't understand. No one had ever bought her. No one had ever wanted her. She had been treated like trash for so long. Now someone had paid for her without a second thought. It felt like a dream, too surreal to be true. The commander turned to her, his voice soft but firm. "Come with me. You're safe now." Lira didn't move. She was too afraid to believe him. Her world had been shattered and she had learned never to trust anyone. But the commander didn't force her. He simply waited, standing there patiently. Finally, with trembling legs, Lira took a step forward. For the first time in her life, she felt a flicker of hope. But she couldn't let herself believe it just yet. Could one human truly change everything for her? And as the commander led her away, the crowd watched in stunned silence, wondering who this strange human was and what he intended to do with the last alien slave on the block. Lira couldn't believe what had just happened. The hum of the spaceship's engines was soft, almost soothing, but it did nothing to calm the storm raging inside her. She sat in a small, dimly lit cabin, her hands still shackled. The air inside the ship smelled faintly of metal and machinery, but there was something different about it, something that made her feel almost safe. But safety was a feeling she hadn't known for years, and it didn't come easily. She kept her head down, unable to look at the man who had purchased her like she was some kind of rare treasure. She had learned long ago not to trust anyone. Trust had only ever led to pain, pain that had scarred her body and soul. And this human, he had bought her. Why? Was he just another monster, looking to profit from her kind? Or was he different? Lira was afraid to even ask. Instead, she sat quietly, her back against the cool metal wall of the ship, feeling the weight of her own thoughts. The image of her homeworld flashed in her mind, her people, her family, everything lost in the blink of an eye. Her planet was destroyed, wiped out by the humans she had once considered enemies. She had been taken as a slave along with many others, used for labor, traded like cattle. Every day had been a struggle for survival, and now she was in the hands of another human. The door to her cabin opened, and the commander stepped in. He looked down at her with a gentle but firm gaze, as if he had seen too much pain in his life to inflict more on others. His uniform was simple, but his presence was commanding. Lira flinched slightly, instinctively recoiling from him, expecting another harsh order or a cruel joke. But he didn't speak at first. Instead, he placed a small bowl of food on the table beside her. It was warm, and it smelled real. Nothing like the tasteless slop she had been given on the slave ship. She stared at it for a moment, unsure of what to do. Could it be poisoned? Was he trying to make her trust him just so he could break her later? The commander must have noticed her hesitation, because he sighed and sat across from her. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I just want to help." Lira couldn't respond. Her throat felt tight, as though the words had been stolen from her. She had no idea how to talk to a human anymore. It had been so long since anyone had shown her kindness, if that's even what this was. "Why?" Lira finally managed to whisper, her voice shaky. "Why did you buy me? I'm just nothing, a slave. A tool?" The commander's expression softened, but there was something in his eyes, a deep sadness, perhaps even regret. He leaned forward, his voice low and sincere. "Because I don't believe anyone should be treated the way you've been treated. You're not a tool. You're a person, Lira. You deserve to be free." Lira blinked, the words feeling strange in her ears. "Free?" she echoed. "I've never been free. I don't know what that means." The commander studied her for a moment, and then, with a sudden look of determination, he stood up. "I'll show you." With that, he began to work on the control panel in the cabin. Lira watched him, still unsure of what was happening. She had seen humans before in the markets, at the auctions. They had all been cold, calculating, never interested in anything other than their own gain. But this man was different. He wasn't looking at her like a thing to be controlled like all the others had. There was no greed in his eyes, no hunger to take advantage of her. When he finished, the ship's system seemed to shift. Lira felt the shackles on her wrists loosen, and before she knew it, they fell away completely. The cold metal dropped to the floor with a soft clink. She stared at her freed hands in disbelief, her heart racing. It had been so long since she had been free to move without chains. She rubbed her wrists, half expecting the shackles to reappear at any moment. The commander sat back down and looked at her. "You're free now, Lira," he said, his voice steady but kind. "You don't have to be a slave anymore." Lira's mind raced. Free. What did that mean for her? What did it even feel like? She couldn't remember the last time she had been in control of her own life, of her own body. The memories of the slave auctions, of being sold and traded like cattle, flooded back. They felt so fresh, so painful. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice trembling with emotion. Why would you help someone like me? The commander's gaze softened and he leaned forward once more. Because I've seen what this galaxy does to people like you. I've seen the destruction and the pain, and I won't stand by while it happens. You're more than just an alien slave, Lira. You're a person, and I'm going to help you rebuild your life. It's not going to be easy, but you don't have to face it alone. Lira didn't know what to say. She had heard many promises in her life, but none of them had ever been kept. She had been let down by her own people, by the humans who had destroyed her planet. The idea that this man, this commander, actually cared about her seemed almost impossible to accept. But as she looked into his eyes, something stirred inside her, a small flicker of hope. She didn't want to believe it, but she couldn't ignore it either. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for her after all. Slowly, she picked up the bowl of food he had placed in front of her. The warmth of it felt real, like a lifeline in a dark and lonely world. For the first time in what seemed like forever, she took a bite. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe this human truly was different. Maybe he could give her a future. But there was still so much she didn't understand, so many questions left unanswered. One thing was clear, though, her journey was far from over. And this human might be the one person who could change everything for her. But the road ahead would not be easy. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and there were many who would want to see her fail. And there were secrets. Secrets Lira had buried deep inside herself that she wasn't ready to confront. Secrets that could change everything. Lira stood by the small window of the ship's cabin, staring out into the endless blackness of space. Stars dotted the sky like tiny diamonds, but to her, they seemed as distant and cold as everything she had lost. Her heart ached when she thought of her homeworld, the green fields, the bright skies, the peaceful days before the war came. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. Her mind constantly returned to one question. Why had he chosen her? The commander, Ryan, had been kind to her, but kindness felt like an illusion, one that would disappear the moment he grew tired of her, the moment she became too much of a burden. She didn't know how to accept his help or even how to trust his promises. She had seen too many people in her life say one thing and do another. A quiet knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Ryan stepped in, his usual serious expression softened by something she couldn't quite read. "We're going to be in a safe sector soon. Thought I'd check on you." Lira nodded but didn't look at him. Her emotions were a swirling mess, and she was afraid if she spoke, she might break down. Instead, she kept her gaze fixed on the stars, trying to ignore the heaviness in her chest. Ryan took a step closer, but he didn't push her to talk. His presence was steady, like an anchor in a storm. He had a way of being around her without making her feel crowded or forced. He simply stood there watching her, waiting. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to trust you." Ryan didn't seem surprised by her words. He had probably expected them. "I understand," he said calmly. "But you don't need to trust me all at once. Trust is something that has to be earned. I'm not going to force you to feel something you don't." Lira finally turned to face him, the words catching in her throat. "I don't understand why you're doing this. You bought me like I was a piece of property. People like you don't save people like me. We're nothing." Ryan's eyes softened. "I didn't buy you. I freed you. There's a difference. And you're wrong. You are not nothing." She felt a lump form in her throat at his words, but she quickly shoved the feeling down. The truth was too painful. Her people had been slaves for generations. There had never been anyone to stand up for them. No one who cared. Now for the first time, someone was telling her she wasn't worthless. "You don't know what it's like," she murmured, her voice shaking. "To have your entire world torn apart, to be used and tossed aside like trash. To watch your people die one by one until you're the last one left. There's nothing left in me." Ryan's expression hardened as he sat down beside her. "You're wrong. I do know what it's like." Lira looked at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" He hesitated before speaking, his voice low and rough. "I was in the war. I lost people too. I watched my own men die, saw entire planets reduced to rubble. I've carried that weight every day since. I've been broken just like you." Lira was stunned. She had heard of the wars between humans and her people, the battles that left whole civilizations in ruins. But hearing it from someone who had been there, who had experienced it firsthand, made it feel different. For a moment, they both sat in silence, the weight of their shared pain hanging in the air. Ryan finally spoke again, his tone more somber than she had ever heard. The war didn't just take your world, Lira. It took pieces of me too. And I don't know what it's like to lose everything you've ever known, but I know what it's like to be haunted by it. Every day. That's why I'm here, doing what I'm doing. I'm trying to make up for what was lost. Lira blinked, unsure of what to say. She had never considered that the humans who had destroyed her home could be broken too. She had always seen them as enemies, as oppressors. To think that Ryan might carry the same scars she did felt impossible, but as much as she wanted to reject it, a small part of her began to soften. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to his words. Maybe he wasn't just a man bent on profit, or some soldier following orders. Maybe he truly wanted to help her, to undo some of the damage the war had caused. But before she could say anything, Ryan spoke again. His voice tinged with a sadness that caught her off guard. I lost my wife in the war. She was a medic. She died helping civilians in one of the battles. I tried to save her, but I couldn't. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. I didn't know. Ryan looked down, his expression distant. No one knows, not even the soldiers I fought with. I never told anyone. But it changed me. It broke me. Lyra's heart went out to him. She had lost so much in her own life, but she had never had anyone she truly loved to lose. Ryan's grief was raw, something she could feel in every word he spoke. Why are you telling me this? She asked softly, feeling vulnerable, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Because, Ryan said quietly, his eyes meeting hers, I know what it's like to lose, and I'm not about to let you lose everything else. I know it might not seem like much now, but I want to help you heal. I can't undo the past. I can't bring back your people, but I can stand beside you. I can make sure you're not alone anymore. Lira swallowed hard. She had never thought of herself as deserving of help, especially not from someone like him. But Ryan's words, his sincerity, they made her question everything she had believed. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lira allowed herself to imagine something different. Maybe, just maybe, she could find peace. Maybe the ghost of her past didn't have to define her future. And maybe, just maybe, she could trust Ryan. Lira sat silently in the dim light of the ship's main cabin. Staring at the floor, her mind spinning. She hadn't expected to feel so much in such a short time. It was as if the walls of the world she had built around herself to keep the pain at bay were slowly crumbling, piece by piece. Her heart was beginning to thaw, but there was still a cold, heavy weight buried deep inside her, one she didn't know how to carry. Commander Ryan had shown her kindness, had freed her when everyone else had wanted to use her. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was the truth about why she was truly valuable. The secret that had kept her alive in the darkest moments of her captivity. The ship hummed softly as it cut through space, heading toward a new, unknown destination. Lira could hear the faint footsteps of Ryan as he moved about the ship, his presence calm but persistent. He had been patient with her, never forcing her to speak, but it was clear that something was eating at her. The truth had always been a burden. It was a secret her people had kept for generations, a secret that had cost them everything. If anyone knew, it would make her the most valuable prisoner in the galaxy. But it also made her a target. She was the key to saving her race or destroying it. It wasn't just the destruction of her world that haunted her. It was the fact that her people had never truly been defeated. Her people's genetic code, a secret buried within her own DNA, contained the key to recreating their entire race. It was a power that had once been kept hidden, only passed down through a select few who were entrusted with it. But when the war had come and her people were hunted down and enslaved, the gene was lost to most of them. Lira had inherited it, the last surviving member of her race, the last bearer of the code, and now she was stuck in a ship with a human, someone who had no idea of the danger she posed. The human had been kind to her, but if he learned what she carried inside her, would he still feel the same? Would he still see her as the person she was? Or would she become nothing more than a tool to be exploited, a weapon to be used for his own gain? Her thoughts were interrupted when Ryan entered the cabin. He didn't speak right away, but his presence was like a quiet storm, unsettling but calming at the same time. He looked at her, his eyes scanning her face for signs of something. She wasn't sure what. "You've been quiet," Ryan said softly, his tone careful. "Is something bothering you?" Lyra's heart raced. How could she explain the weight of the secret she carried? How could she tell him that everything he thought he knew about her race, was just a fraction of the truth? She hesitated. "There's something I haven't told you." Ryan raised an eyebrow, a hint of concern in his gaze. He took a seat across from her. "You don't have to tell me if you're not ready, Lira. But if it's something that's bothering you, I'm here to listen." She swallowed hard, her mind racing. Could she trust him? Could she risk telling him the truth and losing everything she had begun to believe in? But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that keeping the secret would only lead to more pain. The truth had already cost her so much. Maybe it was time to face it, to finally let someone in. "I'm not just the last of my kind," she began, her voice barely a whisper. I carry the gene of my people, the genetic key that can bring them back. That's why they wanted me." She looked up at him, her silver eyes filled with something like fear. "That's why they kept me alive." Ryan leaned forward, his eyes widening slightly. "The gene? What do you mean?" Lira nodded slowly, trying to find the words. "My people weren't just any race. We were advanced beyond anything the galaxy has seen. We had technology, knowledge, powers that could change everything. But when the war came and my people were defeated, they wiped out everything. They killed everyone who had the gene, except for me, and now I'm the last one left. I'm the last hope for my race." Ryan sat back, his expression a mixture of shock and awe. "So you're saying that you have the power to bring your people back?" Lira nodded again, her heart heavy with the weight of her confession. "Yes, but it's not that simple. There are others who know about the gene. The raiders we encountered, those traitors, they weren't just after a slave. They wanted me because I'm the key to unlocking the power of my people again. And if they get a hold of me, they'll use that power for their own gain." Ryan's face hardened, his jaw tightening with a mix of anger and determination. "I'll protect you, Lira. You don't have to be afraid anymore." But Lira shook her head. "You don't understand. It's not just about protection. If they capture me, if anyone finds out about the gene, everything will change. The entire galaxy will be after me. They won't stop until they have it." Ryan stood up, his movements quick and purposeful. "We won't let that happen. We'll find a way to keep you safe. We'll get you to a place where they can't reach you. No one will use you like that." Lira felt a strange sense of relief at his words, but the doubt lingered. Could she truly trust him? Could she believe that someone like him, someone who was part of the very force that had destroyed her people, could protect her, let alone her people? But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something that made her believe, if only a little bit. She saw a man who had lost everything, just like her. A man who understood pain, and maybe, just maybe, they could heal together, but the road ahead would be perilous. The gene she carried wasn't just a gift, it was a curse. And every step they took from here would be filled with danger. But for the first time in a long time, Lira allowed herself to hope. Maybe they could rebuild what had been destroyed. The stars outside the ship seemed to swirl, stretching into long streaks of light as the ship accelerated through hyperspace. Inside the cabin, the hum of the engines was a constant background, but all Lira could hear was the quiet thumping of her own heart. She felt something changing inside her, something she wasn't sure she was ready for, but there was no turning back. The truth about her race, the secret she had carried for so long, had been laid bare. Now, it wasn't just about survival. It was about a future that had once seemed impossible. Ryan had been steadfast in his promise to protect her, but Lira couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. She knew it wasn't just the raiders or the bounty hunters who were after her. There were bigger forces at play. The galaxy had always been a place of constant conflict, and now her very existence had the potential to tip the scales. She was a weapon, whether she liked it or not. The weight of it all pressed down on her, and she couldn't help but wonder how much longer Ryan could keep his word. It wasn't just about keeping her safe anymore. It was about keeping the secret from everyone else, from the people who would use her, abuse her, and tear her apart to get what they wanted. Lira had spent so many years being invisible, being ignored, and she wasn't sure how to handle the attention now. She wasn't sure she wanted it. And yet, every time she looked at Ryan, the overwhelming sense of gratitude and trust grew stronger. He had freed her, taken her in when no one else would. He had given her a chance she never thought she'd have again. But how long would that last? The ship shook suddenly, throwing her off balance. The steady hum of the engines faltered and a red warning light flickered to life. Lira jumped to her feet, her pulse quickening. Ryan had taught her to keep calm in situations like this, but she couldn't help the surge of panic that gripped her. Ryan's voice crackled through the intercom. "Lira, get to the control room now. We're in trouble." Without thinking, she rushed to the cockpit where Ryan was already working at the controls. His face was tight with concentration as he punched in commands. The ship jolted again, this time with more force, sending a wave of fear through her. "What's happening?" she asked, stepping up beside him. "We've got company," Ryan said, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. "Someone's tracking us. They know we're here." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. "Who?" she asked, her eyes scanning the readings on the screen. "Is it the raiders? The traitors?" Ryan's expression darkened. "No, worse, I'm picking up a bounty hunter signature. These guys don't take prisoners." A chill ran down Lyra's spine. Bounty hunters, the worst of the worst. Mercenaries hired to track down and eliminate targets no matter the cost. They didn't care who they worked for or why. They were just after the payout. And now they were after her. "What do we do?" Lira asked, her voice a mix of fear and determination. She could feel the pressure building both in the cockpit and within herself. The thought of being captured again, of being used by someone else, was unbearable. She couldn't go through that again. Ryan didn't look at her. His focus was on the screen, his fingers flying over the controls. "We fight," he said, his tone resolute. "We outrun them or we destroy them." Lira looked at him, torn between the need to protect herself and the loyalty she felt for him. Ryan had given her everything, but could she ask him to risk his life for her? Could she stand by and let him take on this battle, knowing that it wasn't just his life on the line, it was hers too? The urgency in the cockpit was palpable. The ship was being pulled in two directions, the need to escape and the need to face the danger head-on. The hum of the engines deepened, the sounds of the battle ahead already echoing in her mind. "I can help," Lira said, stepping forward, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm not helpless." Ryan glanced at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice. "Lira, no. You're not trained for this. I can protect you." "I'm not a prisoner anymore," she replied, her eyes meeting his. "I'm not someone you need to protect. You said you wouldn't let anyone use me again. Well, I won't let anyone use you." Ryan hesitated for a moment, his mind clearly racing. It wasn't just about the battle. It was about what would happen after the dust settled. He could protect her. He had protected her. But could he continue to do so, knowing the price they both might pay? The flashing warning lights on the control panel brought him back to the present. "Fine," he said, his voice firm. "But stay behind me. Do what I say. If we get through this, then we'll figure out the rest." Lira nodded. She knew it wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready. She had to be. The ship bucked again, this time more violently. Ryan's hands gripped the controls as he pushed the ship into evasive maneuvers. The bounty hunter's ship was closing in fast, its guns charging up. It was clear this wasn't going to be an easy escape. Lira felt the surge of fear and adrenaline mixing inside her. But there was also something else. Something stronger. It was the sense that this was her fight too. She wasn't just some helpless alien. She wasn't just the last of her race. She was more than that. And if she was going to survive, she would have to stand and face the challenges head on. As the bounty hunter's ship fired a warning shot, Lira knew this was a turning point. The choice was now hers, to stay hidden or to fight for her future. And for the first time since the war, she felt the weight of her own power, her choice. As Ryan steered the ship into a series of sharp turns, Lira's resolve solidified. She wasn't going to run anymore. Not from her past. Not from the dangers of the galaxy. She was ready to reclaim her future. The tension in the air was thick as the ship veered and spun through the endless black of space. Lira sat beside Ryan, her eyes fixed on the flashing controls in front of her. The ship was now under constant attack from the bounty hunter's ship, which was relentlessly closing in. They were in the heart of hostile space, no backup, no safe haven. The stars outside were nothing but a blur as Ryan navigated with precision, swerving the ship in sharp angles, narrowly avoiding laser blasts. Lira's heart pounded, not just from the danger outside, but from the realization that everything in her life had been leading to this moment. The road ahead was uncertain, and yet, for the first time, it felt like they were making their own path, one that would be defined by their own choices, not by the twisted hands of fate or the cruel forces of war. You ready for this? Ryan asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. Lira turned to look at him. His brow was furrowed in concentration, but his eyes, those blue, calm eyes, seemed to reach her in a way no one else ever had. They weren't just the eyes of a soldier anymore. They were the eyes of a man who had been scarred by loss but was still standing, fighting for what he believed in. And for the first time, Lira understood. He wasn't just protecting her, he was fighting for something more. Ready, she said, her voice quieter than she felt. Her hands gripped the seat beneath her, her body tense but resolute. The bounty hunter's ship fired again, a direct hit that rattled their own vessel. The alarms screamed in the cockpit as the control panels flickered. Ryan immediately began rerouting power, stabilizing the ship's systems as best as he could. This isn't just about survival anymore, he said, his words clipped, urgency in every syllable. We're going to end this. Lyra's eyes scanned the ship's diagnostics. She noticed something that could tip the scales in their favor. An old tactical flare in the lower compartment, an artifact from one of their previous skirmishes. It was a weapon, simple but deadly, designed to confuse enemy tracking systems, giving them a window to escape. I've got an idea, Lira said, her voice gaining strength. There's a flare in the lower compartment. If we fire it, we can scramble their systems long enough to make a break for it. Ryan's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. He nodded. Let's do it. Lira quickly unstrapped herself and moved swiftly down the narrow corridor toward the compartment. Her heart beat faster as the countdown in her mind ticked away. Time was slipping away and the hunt was closing in. Her thoughts flashed to her homeworld, to everything she had lost and to what she might still be able to save. She wasn't just the last of her kind anymore. She was part of something new, something better. When Lira reached the flare compartment, she grabbed the device, the weight of it almost comforting in her hands. She ran back to the cockpit, her breath coming in quick bursts. She didn't know what the future held, but in this moment it felt like everything was in her control. The past had haunted her for so long, but now she had the power to change everything. I'm ready, she called out as she slid into the seat beside Ryan once more. He didn't need to ask. He knew what she meant. With a quick press of the button, the flare shot out into space, trailing a burst of light and energy that scrambled the bounty hunter's sensors. The enemy ship's weapons malfunctioned for a split second, just long enough for Ryan to accelerate and veer into a nearby asteroid field. Hold on, Ryan called out as he steered the ship into the twisting maze of rocks and debris. The ship rocked violently, but they were safe for the moment. The bounty hunter's ship was still following them, but the advantage they had gained gave them the precious time they needed. Ryan's focus was absolute as he piloted the ship through the tight gaps between asteroids, dodging incoming fire and keeping one step ahead of their pursuer. Lyra's hands clenched around the seat, but she wasn't afraid. For the first time she felt alive, as if the choices she made truly mattered. She wasn't running away from her past anymore. She wasn't hiding from what she was. She was embracing it, and that feeling, that power, surged through her. Ryan made a sharp turn, and the bounty hunter's ship, unable to react in time, collided with a massive asteroid. The explosion rocked space, sending shockwaves through the surrounding field. Lira watched as the remnants of the enemy ship drifted off into the void. They were free. For the first time, the quiet that followed didn't feel empty. It felt like a new beginning. Ryan eased the ship into a stable orbit around a nearby moon, his hands still firmly gripping the controls. He let out a long, relieved breath as the alarm lights slowly dimmed. We did it, Lira whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She didn't know how to describe what she was feeling. It was relief, yes, but also something else. Something that felt like hope, or the seed of it planted deep within her. Ryan turned to her, his expression softening. We did. Lira looked out at the stars, the light of distant galaxies reflecting in her silver eyes. They had faced impossible odds, fought for their freedom, and come out on top. But it wasn't just about the fight. It was about what came next. It was about the future they could build, not just for her, but for a galaxy that had forgotten what hope looked like. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan's gaze was steady, and for a moment there was no hesitation in his answer. We build. We rebuild, and this time we do it together. Lira turned to him, the weight of the galaxy lifting from her shoulders. She wasn't the last of her kind anymore. She wasn't alone. She had found something worth fighting for. Someone worth fighting for. As the ship drifted through space, Ryan and Lira shared a moment of peace. They were no longer enemies, no longer strangers. They were a team, a union of two worlds that had once been torn apart. Together they would forge a new path, not just for themselves, but for all those who had lost their way. And maybe, just maybe, the stars above weren't so cold after all.